Okay, well, aloha kukahiaka, everybody, and I am very, very grateful to have an opportunity to speak here today and share some of the things that I work on, that I think a lot about, and we're going to talk about mindfulness and caregiving. First, I want to give a big mahalo to the sponsors, Catholic Charities of Hawaii and Haliku'ike, a couple amazing organizations that really do a lot for our community, as I'm sure many of you know already. And so thank you to um, the folks who set this up, Jody, Diane, and Dorothy, and everybody else behind the scenes, and the funding as well to do everything that you folks do. So, um, okay. Uh, so my hope for today, and you know, is that you come away feeling a little more confident at being able to not fix things. And that might sound strange because, of course, all of us, we want tools, we want skills, we want to learn more about how to deal with things better, more information, and more ways of solving the many, many problems that we face as caregivers, as people. And this is something that I find that I do a lot with the folks that I work with. And hopefully by the end of this hour or so, you'll have a better idea of what I mean, and hopefully kind of see, if you don't yet see that, you know, why not fixing is actually super, super useful when, things can't be fixed, and how useful it is to practice this, because this is really hard for us as humans to not fix things, or try to, not try to fix things sometimes. So let's get into that a little bit more. Um, so my agenda for today, and I almost never get through all my slides when I talk because I can go on tangents within tangents within tangents sometimes. And so just bear with me. But what we're going to try to do today in general, broadly, is discuss mindfulness and this idea of acceptance that is part of the definition of mindfulness that I'm using and that I use in my work. What does that mean? We're going to explore caregiver stress, how to detect it. We're going to try to do some mindfulness as a practice, and hopefully leave with some practical ideas about how you can bring mindfulness and acceptance into your life as caregivers, as healthcare providers, as human beings. Um, this is useful in all of my roles as a father, a spouse, a son, a brother, a friend, a psychologist, a person driving in traffic, which is often when my least favorite parts of myself come out. But this stuff is useful in all of those situations, in all those ways that it can be challenging to be a human sometimes. All right, let's talk about stress first. And I'm going to talk about it from a couple different angles. And because stress is this general term, right? And it's very common in our language today. People mean many things by it. It's kind of a catch-all phrase, or people can mean different things. And just so you know, stress is not really like a medical or a diagnostic term in psychology, psychiatry, or medicine, really. Um, it's sort of, you know, what are we going to talk about today as stress? So I'm going to define it today as the mind body, kind of this, we have this kind of separation of mind and body sometimes in our thinking, but it's really all connected. It's all one thing. So the mind body's responses to difficulties that we encounter, and it involves the activation of our physiological and emotional systems by perceived problems. And so they might be a real problem, like a dog snarling at us, a couple feet away. That's a real problem. or a perceived problem, which is thinking about, what might happen tomorrow, and something that actually hasn't happened yet. Both of those can trigger these things. The mind body's way of motivating us to figure something out or fix something. So this is related to fix mode that we're going to talk about. This is related to motivating us. So they talk about the U-shaped curve of stress and performance, and in our body's low stress, we're not really that motivated. We're just super chill. We're not really gonna be top of our game in some tests of performance, but at sort of a medium level of stress, we're on, we're going, like in sports, we are performing at kind of our peak, and then when stress passes a certain point, it starts to actually get in the way of what we're doing. So some level of this stress is actually functional. But yeah, much of the stress we're talking about, especially as caregivers, feels very uncomfortable. So we want to do things that will make it go away. That's our natural response. Um, Sometimes we can do that by fixing the problem. And when we fix a problem that is kind of causing stress, oftentimes we feel a relief of that stress, and that's great. But what if we can't fix the problem? And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. We're going to go into a little bit of biology, kind of anatomy, physiology 101 here. And we're going to talk about the autonomic nervous system. So, the autonomic nervous system is this automatic, and that's we can think of autonomic as automatic nervous system. So, this network of nerves that connect various parts of our brain, spinal cord, and the organ systems in our bodies. So this diagram you can see has the autonomic nervous system broken up into two parts. The left side with the brain and brainstem on the left side with the red word sympathetic nervous system and the red lines. This is our fight or flight or freeze or fix subsystem. So you might have heard of fight or flight, and then we like to add on some of these other potential responses that it can make us do. Freeze or fix, and we're going to talk about fix today. Um, and then the other side, the green side, the parasympathetic nervous system is the rest and digest mode. Um, uh, so all these parts make up how we feel. This is how another way of understanding why we feel emotions, why we feel anxiety, why we feel excitement and joy and arousal and anger, why we feel hot, why we sweat in certain emotions, why our muscles tense up, because our brains our brainstem and our organs are all intimately linked. Um, and we share a lot of these systems with other vertebrate animals. So, other mammals, birds, reptiles, fish, even. Um, so we know that these systems are very old and very important to survival. And we know that um, these things evolved these things have been around for, tens of millions of years, but our rational brain, the brain that we think is in charge, has only been around for, a couple million years at most. And so we're actually emotional creatures like all the other ones, survival creatures with this newfangled set of neural connections in the front here that make our head and brain so big. Other animals must be like, whoa, those heads are so weird. Um, they stick out at the front so much. And but that is a very recent thing. So that's not driving most of the time. This in our bodies is. Okay. Um, all of these things um, are not connected to our frontal cortex. So these things are not in our control. So for example, when our fight or flight or freeze or fix system is triggered, what happens? So looking at the left side, we have pupils dilation. This is when we're triggered for fight or flight. We have um, saliva and tears are inhibited because we don't need to cry when we're doing this. We don't need to digest, and make saliva. We're not eating. Our breathing rate increases. Our blood vessels constrict because we're shunting blood away from these rest and digest systems to parts of our body that we're going to need immediately for survival. Heart rate speeds up, glucose is released from the liver so we can have a lot of accessible energy to run or fight the bear or the saber-toothed tiger. And uh, yeah, so I think one of the important points of this is that we cannot directly control our emotions, and we aren't meant to. But the myths in our society make us think I shouldn't feel this way, or I should be happy, or I shouldn't feel sad. That is weakness. But that is complete bunk. That is myth. And it gets in our way because then we judge how we feel. We feel self-criticism on top of the other things that we feel naturally. Okay. Now, the one part of our subsystem, this whole subsystem that is both conscious and unconscious, connected to our conscious mind and our unconscious nervous system, is our breath. And that's why it is very cool and very special. And that is why one reason of understanding why it's found in almost all kinds of spiritual practices, yoga, different types of centering prayer in Christian traditions, all different types of meditation across the board. It's not a coincidence that breath is the focus in many of them because um, it is one of the subsystems of our physiology that is both conscious and unconscious. Thankfully, we don't have to think about breathing when we're asleep or we're doing something else. But when we do think about it, we can adjust how it is and thus send signals back to the rest of the autonomic system that is not in our direct control. So we are hardwired for survival, and it can become a habit to be in fight or flight mode, especially in the modern era where we're getting 50 emails a day, or we're thinking about taxes coming up, and all these things trigger fight or flight mode that weren't around when we evolved this stuff. So this is what we can call chronic stress. And this kind of stress can harm our health and well-being in different ways. So another way of looking at it, this is kind of the same thing. Our autonomic nervous system is broken down into the fight or flight mode that increases our heart rate, breathing, blood pressure, muscle tension, and it turns off the digestive system and immune function. So you can imagine if you are in fight or flight mode and stress mode a lot of the time, your digestive system might not be working optimally. So you might have GI stress, right? IBS is irritable bowel syndrome is very strongly tied to stress, chronic stress. So it's no surprise that maybe we have difficulty with our digestive system if we're stressed a lot. Also, we get sick more often because our immune system is being turned off because our body's like, we need to survive now. There's a saber-toothed tiger. So turn off all this other stuff because we're going to need this other resources to survive this moment. But in our modern time, for many of us, we don't face life or death systems regularly. Of course, some folks do, and that's a reality for some folks. Um, But oftentimes it's traffic or it's deadlines or it's, communication breakdowns in our family or, abuse in the family or caregiving stress. And it turns off the way that our bodies have evolved to be more often, which is rest and digest mode, breathing, heart rate, blood flow, digestion. So the take home, we are wired for fear to survive, right? But it can become a habit. We get stuck in fight or flight mode, and that's what we can call stress. Now, mindfulness gives us a way to become more aware of this habit response and to do something different. Not to change directly how we feel. This is mindfulness is not about fixing our emotions, but it is helping us be more aware and give us more of an opportunity to do something different inside and outside ourselves. Okay, so let's talk about caregiver stress, something that I'm sure folks are very, very familiar with. I'm just going to go through some of the big ones that are often the focus of work I do with caregivers, one-on-one or in our caregiving groups. Stress from life changes and adjustments, big and small. You have this new caregiver role and you have to give up a lot. Your life is changed in ways that you didn't sign up for and you didn't anticipate. So financial challenges. Do you work and pay for care, or do you work less or stop working? And each one has its challenges. Less time for with other family members and friends. Your social life changes. You might have no time off if you're working and caregiving or caregiving 24 hours. You have to assume a lot more responsibilities. So often there's a division in families of who's doing what. The person with Alzheimer's or other dementias used to do the taxes, but now they can't. That falls to you, maybe. You got to learn how. Less time for exercise, hobbies, changes to future plans. Shucks, I was, let's say me and my spouse were planning on traveling when we retired, and now, spouse has dementia, and those hoped for things, those things we worked so hard for, might no longer be possible, and grieving those lost futures, those lost hopes, strains relationships because of so much stress. Of course, the day-to-day stuff, interrupted sleep, so your loved one is waking up in the middle of the night confused, wandering, or has to go bathroom many times in the night, or any of a number of things. Um, so those are life changes and adjustments, just a few. Other sources of stress, emotions we're unaware of or feel that we're unable to express, right? And often these are related to prolonged grief with dementia. So, what is prolonged grief? If a loved one passes away suddenly, there is a grieving process that happens afterwards, but there's this kind of like before and after. They're there and they're not. That's one way it can happen when you lose someone, of course. But with Alzheimer's and other kinds of declines, we are like losing parts of our loved one and our life with them, our relationship with them before our very eyes, and it's happening over time. So, um, and that's different. There's different ways that grief can affect us when it's happening uh, gradually and in front of us. There can be disagreements and imbalance in family involvement. Um, and emotions and behaviors of the person with dementia and related to their own feelings of loss of independence, dignity, and their ways of trying to cope with confusion and shame within the illness experience itself. So, I mean, this is just like, you know, 20 tons of things that can affect caregivers and each one be contributing to this kind of chronic stress that's in the body that we talked about in the last few slides, carrying that stress in the body most, if not nearly all the time. Um, and then, of course, all this is mixed together with regular life challenges, like maybe you have kids that you are taking care of and raising, and you have a grandparent or parent with that you have to caregive for. You have taxes, you have traffic, you have pets, you have mortgage or rent, you have all that kind of stuff. Politics, right? So um, it all is together. We can't, it's hard to really separate out. But okay, Most people probably know some ways that they're stressed and can detect it, but other ways, other signs that you might be stressed, chronically stressed. We tend to be less able or motivated or, to take care of ourselves. Caregivers, it's like, when is the last time you exercised? They're like, "Pfft, what are you talking about, right? Um, but even when we do have some time, sometimes it's harder to engage in those exercises or self-care. Sometimes there's guilt of like I shouldn't be thinking about myself because that's selfish, or other reasons. Poor sleep, of course, for many different reasons. That can look a lot of different ways. Always feeling tired, exhausted. Whoops. Where did my screen go? There we go. Um, Easily irritable, grumpy, having a short fuse, not as patient with people, um, feeling resentful of the person that we're caring for, feeling less interest in things you used to enjoy doing. Like if you had a break for some reason and you used to enjoy, working in the garden or making lauhala or look what like going out and going to the beach, and then you just don't feel like, I don't have that interest in that right now. Maybe we escape a lot by distracting ourselves. TV, beer, ice cream, Skittles, all those things can be ways of just giving ourselves a little break, and often internally from our stress. And there's nothing wrong with these things. But of course, they can become their own issue if we are depending on them as a way to, not feel stuff, which is something very common we can get into. Feeling alone, feeling isolated from people, um, and also isolating ourselves, right? Avoiding people. Sometimes we don't even want to burden people, and we don't even feel like we can talk to people who have, quote, normal lives because they might be talking about something that feels totally trivial. But we also don't want to burden people with talking about our own stuff over and over again. We might feel low mood, hopeless. We might get sick a lot. We might have tension, headaches, migraines. So stress can be sort of showing up, giving us signs of its presence in all these different ways in our physiology, our bodies, migraines, IBS, immune system, in our actions, how we speak, what we do, and in our relationships. So yeah, all this stuff is going on. So I'm feeling like this is a big downer right now. So um, what are we gonna do, right? What are we gonna do about this? Fix mode, right? Let's fix that. So humans are natural problem solvers, and fix mode is very important and useful. I'm sure each of you is in fix mode every day in large and small ways. Your fixed mode includes, the best way to get to work given the time of day and the traffic and, the three things you have to do. Okay, what's the most efficient way? That's fixed mode, right? That's problem solving mode. Um, and we, animals and humans in particular are very, very natural and effective problem solvers. And so I'm not knocking that. That is awesome. Um, Fixed mode has made the world we have today. Technology, our lifespans, medical treatments, all of that is fixed mode. Great. Um, and it is so important for caregivers, of course. Every single day, there's things to be large and small, that you're problem solving. So fixed mode is not bad, just like a hammer is not bad by itself. In and of itself, a hammer is not bad. It can be useful and helpful if you're pounding nails. But, but, uh, if all you have is a hammer, what? So the problem with fix only mode, and that's what we're going to talk about. As humans, we get so good at fixing throughout our lives that when we encounter stuff that does not lend itself to fixing, we just keep on trying to fix. And that actually adds more suffering in our lives, to try to fix things that can't be fixed. So we often find ourselves in fix only mode. So our society, culture of medicine emphasizes curing, fixing, and for problems that can be fixed, great. If can, great. Yeah, if can. Some cannot. Some cannot. And this is, as I sort of progressed in my psychology training, I realized that my experience with mindfulness and Buddhism that predated my interest in psychology actually was going to be really useful for working with older adults and caregivers because, especially in older stages of life or when there's chronic issues, not fixing becomes even more and more and more important to learn how to do in different ways. So things like chronic pain, insomnia, the harder one tries to sleep, the harder it is to sleep sometimes. Getting and looking older, losing things, dementia, death, right? All these things, there are many cases where things are not fixable. And if I am, this sort of like, you know, fight to the end, I'm going to fix everything and I'm never going to give up because that's weakness, or I'm never going to accept anything that, um, I can't fix. I'm going to be causing myself and other people more suffering. So, Um, another thing we can't fix, but we often try to, is our unwanted, uncomfortable, unacceptable thoughts and emotions. In our cultures, we believe that we can and should be able to control our inner experience, our emotions and thoughts. We're told from a young age, don't cry, um, you know, don't be weak. Emotions are weakness, right? Okay, what happens when fixing isn't working? So we try, let's say we feel this sense of, depression or something, and we say, we just like, I gotta just be stronger. I gotta be stronger. I gotta not feel this. So, but it's not working because I still feel this feeling. And maybe I try harder. If only I were more together or stronger. I hear these words all the time with folks that I work with. If only I were normal, if I weren't crazy, I would be able to be control how I feel. Um, by the way, one thing that share with folks, after having worked with, a few thousand people in my career, it's not that long compared to other people yet, but it's quite a few people, is that I've never met a crazy person. I have never met one. I've worked with folks with serious mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, lots of different things, but they're not crazy. It's very understandable why things are happening the way they are. So I've never met a crazy person, but I've also never met a normal person. And in my personal life too, I've never met a normal person. That doesn't exist. Those are just mythological ideas that we have in our society that sort of make us fall into comparison mode, either to make us feel better about ourselves or worse about ourselves, but usually it's not that useful. Okay. We feel like we've failed if it's not working and we're critical of ourselves, right? Maybe if I just swear at myself or call myself names, maybe then I'll be stronger. Maybe if I beat myself up or punish myself, um, maybe that'll work because that seems to work with other people, right? If I call someone names, they tend to be, feel less bad. Is that? No. We feel frustration, hopelessness. We take it out on ourselves and others, right? We continue doing things that make us feel better in the short term to avoid having to face the feeling that we think is the problem. So, in certain situations, the efforts to fix things that can't be fixed exacerbate the problem or become its own problem. So, this is why fixing things that can't be fixed is not as useful as learning how to not fix things that can't be fixed. I hope that's starting to make sense. A lot of experimental and psychology studies show that thought suppression or trying to push or suppress thoughts or feelings leads to them actually coming more often and strongly. So it actually backfires. Yeah. Avoidance of anxiety leads to increased anxiety over time. Um, when you avoid the thing that makes you anxious, you feel relief in the short term, but it always becomes more and more scary because uh, you're convincing your body that it is going to hurt you. Anyway, anxiety, that's another talk. We'll do that another time. Other studies show that acceptance of pain, practicing this mindful acceptance of something like chronic pain leads to lower physical and psychological disability and lower pain intensity than avoidance coping, trying to avoid pain, make it go away all the time. Okay, what are some unhelpful forms of fixed mode? Worry, okay? And the slides that are posted right now as PDFs are I added some other stuff this morning because I'm just kind of I can't thinking about how to talk about these things and oh yeah, I talk about this stuff with my clients. Let me throw this stuff in. So worry, right? Worry, and sorry about the small font here. Worry, what is worry? Repetitive, distressing thoughts about the future. What's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen tonight when we're trying to sleep? What's going to happen next month or in a year from now? Um, and this is beyond what useful predicting and preparing we can do. So there's some amount, of course, of preparation, planning, um, but beyond what is useful, there is this worry. And we can talk about it as our brains and bodies trying to fix the future from the present. Okay. So it's reaching out into the unknown, and trying to fix something. And that is a good example of unhelpful fix mode. Rumination now is like the close sibling of worry. It's the same thing, but it's repetitive distressing thoughts about the past, the constant what ifs, the whys, the shoulds, I should have. Don't should on yourself, we say, right? That go beyond useful analysis of the past to learn from and inform our actions in the present. So yes, there's lots we can learn from the past in service of how do we live now? How do I want to be now, given what happened in the past? What can I learn from it? But beyond that, which takes probably a few minutes, just like the preparing for the future, beyond a few minutes, most of the stuff after that is the hamster wheel. What ifs? What if only? I should have. Trying to fix the past from the present. These are two common and very unhelpful forms of fix mode. Another one, sort of a very common category of unhelpful thinking style that we all fall into is jumping to conclusions. Um, all of this is based in the fact that we are very uncomfortable by not knowing. Not knowing is one of the most uncomfortable feelings for us. So we make up answers, whether it's about the past or the future. If we don't know the answer, right, then we feel uncomfortable, and so we put guesses in that actually start to feel like the truth to get rid of the discomfort. So fortune telling is thinking we know what's going to happen, guessing the future, but then believing it. And then mind reading, which is another common one, which I talk about with all the folks I work with, which is I know, they said that because they think X about me, or they did this because they think X about me. Whereas we don't really know unless they told us what's in their mind. Okay. All of the above are automatic fix modes, and they are trying to help us. And this is one huge part of mindful acceptance, which is our bodies are always trying to help us. It's not the enemy. But it doesn't realize that it's not being helpful. So it's not our enemy. It's like a friend, and you may have these, which are friends who are trying to help in unhelpful ways, and they don't realize they're being helpful. Their intention is, of course, good. Just like our worry and rumination, it's trying to help us. So when we see worry and rumination as enemies and problems, we're more likely to feel threatened by them and like we are crazy. But that is not crazy at all. It's being human. Yeah. Another thing that fixed mode robs us of is the ability to connect. So always trying to fix your care partner, the person with Alzheimer's, say, can make it hard to be present with them in the moment just as they are and connect with them. Um, People with dementia can sometimes feel more shame, embarrassment, frustration when people try to continue to fix them. People feel ashamed. They feel the frustration coming from the family member who's reminding of them of what they forgot. Or even, those very well-intentioned ways to like, let's do these exercises because it's going to make your memory better. As caregivers, I hear this in the classes. We might look back on this moment with our care partner and miss what was good about it, even in the midst of challenges and losses. So we hear a lot in classes where, down the line, their person is no longer verbal, and they miss the times, even in the middle part of the disease, when they were really forgetful, and sometimes what they said didn't make sense, but they could still talk, and that's something that they didn't realize they were going to miss. And being in fixed mode prevents us from being able to sort of put aside our fixed goals and just be with the person as they are today. So age-old wisdom, right? The Serenity Prayer is a good guide. And this is basically what mindfulness is helping us do. Give me the strength to change the things I can change, the serenity to accept the things I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference. So the work in psychology that I do with people and what mindfulness is trying to do is to help us clarify what things go in what bucket, the change bucket or the acceptance bucket, and how to practice those things. Because that's often where a lot of our suffering comes from. And local wisdom, right? If can, no can, no can. That's the same thing. If can, no can, no can. Some of our stress comes from trying to fix things that can't be fixed, right? Um, Most problems have both things. So we don't want to get stuck in either or. It's hard for us to hold that as humans, but we can hold and get better at practicing that both things I can work on and things I can't change are here in this one thing in front of me all the time. There's both. People ask, what do you mean accept? So you mean you want me give up? Give up on my person with Alzheimer's? No, 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 not at all. Um, but maybe direct the energy of fixed mode to learning these caregiver skills, learning communication skills that help you be present with your person as they are in ways that um, are connecting and positive and meaningful for both of you in this way. Okay, so we can get better at not fixing. There's this third alternative between futile effort and giving up. And mindfulness practices help us change our relationship to the unfixable challenges um, through practicing acceptance. What is acceptance not? Acceptance is not a feeling of bliss. Doesn't mean that the pain in your legs go away, right? It's not the absence of pain. It's not forgetting what you've been through or traumatic experiences. It's not getting over it. It's not weak. It actually takes courage to make space for and sit with some of this very difficult stuff. Takes courage. It's not giving up. So what acceptance is allowing our emotions to actually do their work. Newsflash, we have all this amazing complex circuitry and interconnected biology that produces emotions like sadness, pain, sometimes anger, fear, happiness, because those emotions are what help us adjust to the changing things in our life. But we need to, one of the best things we can do is get out of the way of our emotions to allow them to do their work. Um, what acceptance is, letting go of trying to fix and control what can't be fixed. Acceptance can be a gift to your loved ones. If you can sit with your own distress and with their suffering, if you can sit with your loved one's suffering instead of always trying to fix them, that can be a huge gift to them. Because then you can actually be there and hear them and hold their suffering a little bit more instead of being so uncomfortable with what they're going through that you have to fix it because you can't hold it. Acceptance exists in in multiple places in our head, in our thoughts. I accept that my spouse has dementia. That's a cognitive way of accepting. I accept that I feel sad right now and that sadness is valid and important. This is a practice. It's in our actions. I can resist the fix impulse, right? And but it's not a feeling. Acceptance is not a feeling. If we're sad, acceptance is making space for sadness. It's not somehow magically saying, I accept sadness, so therefore sadness goes away. No. Sadness, allowing sadness is part of accepting the reality of a situation. Acceptance is not feeling serenity or calmness. Calmness, this is one of the biggest ways that mindfulness is misinterpreted in popular culture these days and how it's profitable, right? It's sold as a commodity of like, this is how you're going to feel better. It's another pack of Budweiser cans or a pack of cigarettes, of course, with way fewer side effects. But it's not just a feel-good thing. It's a being with life thing. It can be cultivated using practices. So let's do one. And I know I'm watching time and I want to get to some of these other things, but we're going to do at least one little practice right now. And we're going to do mindful breathing because, as mentioned, breathing is this amazing, miraculous function of our body that is both connected to the sympathetic and parasympathetic, the conscious and unconscious aspects of our neurobiology. So let's see, what do I have here? It relates to diaphragmatic breathing a little bit. You may have heard diaphragmatic breathing in sort of like stress reduction practices. Diaphragmatic breathing is a practice to gradually relax yourself. Mindfulness is not the same exactly as diaphragmatic breathing, but you can kind of use them together. Diaphragmatic breathing is learning how to sort of remembering how to breathe like we used to breathe when we were little babies. If you have a little baby around these days or remember being around a little baby, if you remember a baby laying down and sleeping, you remember when they breathe in, their little tummies expand like a balloon. They breathe in, their tummies get bigger, and they breathe out, and their tummies go down. That's diaphragmatic breathing. That's using the diaphragm to expand our lungs to their greatest degree. And in doing so, of course, they push down, they open the lungs, and in doing so, push our intestines and other guts. They don't have anywhere to go but out. So that's why our tummy sticks out when we are diaphragm breathing. And interestingly, diaphragmatic breathing, doing it not just 2, 3 times, but 10, 20 times, 30 times, can be a physiological signal to the rest of the stress system that is automatic. Hey, there's no saber-toothed tiger here. There's no shark right here. Let's come back. So let's do, diaphragmatic breathing. You can try that right now, but we're going to do some mindful breathing. So find a posture that feels comfortable. The ideal is if you can sit somehow with your spine in somewhat of an alignment and in a balance. It doesn't have to be rigid. There's no magic. There's nothing, people say, oh, you got to sit a certain way, like the full lotus position, but What about people with no legs? What about people who are in a hospital bed? They can also practice. So nothing magic. Um, so close your eyes if you feel comfortable. And starting by taking a couple deeper than normal breaths. And if your nasal passage allows, you can breathe in and out through your nose. And give yourself permission to not have to fix anything right now, to not have to figure anything out. Let things be as they are. Let things come that come and go that go. And bringing your attention now to the movement, the sensations of movement of your breath going in and out of your nostrils. Or you may notice the feeling, the sensation of breathing somewhere in the throat, in the chest, or in the belly. Wherever you notice the air moving, the physical feelings of air moving. Gently bring your attention, your focus like a flashlight, just to illuminate that. Of course, the mind wanders. You want to look at your text messages. You're thinking about what's for lunch. You're wondering what the heck this is supposed to be doing. Am I doing this right? Or I've done this 1,000 times. I know how to do it. All those are thoughts. That's fine. This is not the right way. That's fine. And whenever you notice that your mind has produced some thoughts, gently bring your awareness back to the breath without fixing those thoughts. Underneath our verbal definition of thinking about breathing is the breathing itself. And that's where we practice coming back to again and again. Mindfulness is not being somewhere, it's coming back again and again. Now, mindfulness can be applied to not just a breath, but anything in the present moment. It could be something we apply and practice with pain in our knee, or this feeling of sadness in our chest. But before I move on, take a couple deeper than normal breaths and open your eyes if you haven't yet. And when I'm practicing with folks, when we're learning this together, I ask folks, what did you notice, observe, or experience? And some folks say I couldn't do it, or that was really good, or that was really bad. And okay, there's evaluations. That's fine. But what else did you observe? Did you observe the breath anywhere in your body as it was moving? Did you observe your mind wandering, and where did it go? Did you observe a moment of noticing and coming back to the breath? Great. All of that is fine and part of the practice. One of the most common concerns is I couldn't clear my mind. I was doing it wrong. Another incredibly common misconception of mindfulness. It's not what it's about. Let's keep going. One thing that I'm observing is the time passing quickly, and I have to accept that I can't slow it down. So I'm going to try to proceed to a few of the things that I want to make sure I say. Um, core definition of mindfulness, it's an ability we all have to pay attention. So there's awareness, to pay attention on purpose to things in the present moment happening right now, and with a attitude of non-judgment, with an attitude of openness, allowing curiosity, acceptance. Now, we can even try to practice non-judgment of our own judgment. So oftentimes when I'm practicing, I might be judging myself because that's of course a habit most of us have. And then I can say, oh, there's judgment. Okay, right. There's judgment. And then sometimes I judge my judgment and be like, I shouldn't be judging myself right now. I'm supposed to be accepting myself and being mindful. And then I can step back and say, oh, there's judgment of judgment. Okay, that's okay. Cool. Here's my breath again. So there's no boundary that we cannot sort of step back from again and make even more space for that too in our practice. Um, it's sort of letting be instead of letting go. People say, I got to let this go. I just have to let it go. But I think a more useful terminology I've found is letting it be. That's mindfulness. Okay, this is one slide I added today because I love plants and I do a lot of INA work, and it's very very important for me as a way to connect with other people in my community and INA and ancestors and my kids, um, and other forms of life that I value so much, plants and animals and all that. I love this proverb, this Japanese proverb that says, the poor farmer cultivates weeds. The mediocre farmer cultivates crops. The best farmer cultivates the soil. And now, I know what that means now after working with plants for 30 years, you know. Um, but this is exactly mindfulness too, applied to our thoughts and feelings, right? The poor farmer cultivates weeds, and that's when we're totally lost in our negative thoughts and feelings and unhelpful thinking habits. We tend to blame others or ourselves. We're totally lost in the stream and we're not even aware. The mediocre farmer cultivates crops. That's focusing on trying to think positively and very judgmental of the weeds. The weeds are bad. I shouldn't be feeling this. Focusing on immediate results and wanting to feel good and get rid of these bad feelings. Often seeing negative feelings as signs of weakness. And I want to just cultivate positivity, which positivity is fine. It's just often another form of trying to fix things that can't be fixed. The best farmer cultivates the soil, trying to practice not seeing the weeds as the enemy, but understanding that how weeds arise. Weeds are a natural thing that happens for very understandable reasons. They're not evil, right? They arise because of causes and conditions. And we work on the soil in ourselves, not fighting feelings, but looking at what thoughts uh, what thoughts increase or decrease suffering. So mindfulness is like cultivating the soil. There's always going to be weeds, but we don't feel that because there are weeds, we're failures. We work with the weeds. We work on it. Things change. Things are not in our control sometimes. The weather, right? Um, yeah. Okay. Mindfulness we can think of as cultivating the soil of our inner self and our relationship to and with our thoughts and feelings, the weeds and the crops. Um, and the soil then shapes what grows. Crops more kind of like balanced thoughts and more positive feelings, and weeds, negative thoughts, unhelpful feelings, self-criticism, more suffering, guilt, shame. Um, so, but we do not, when you grow plants that you do not make a seed grow by your own sheer will. You have to work with the conditions of the environment and the conditions of the seed and the conditions that I know that it's not up to me completely. I can just try to work on the conditions to help this plant grow. The same as our feelings. Our feelings are the plant. We do not make the feelings grow, but we work on the conditions that are leading to the sprouting of this or that. emotion. And it's not something we ever complete. It's a way of practicing with our life. So we can get better at it with practice, and that's huge. It's like learning a language or an instrument. It's not something that we are going to be good at initially because our whole lives we are in fixed mode, and it's almost always been really useful for us, and it still will be, just sometimes it's not, right? It's really good for us, tons of research support. There's lots of different sort of packages of mindfulness, mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR was developed for folks with cancer undergoing chemotherapy, dealing with how yucky that feels. So they're not feeling great, but they're using mindfulness to help them live differently within that. It's the opposite of autopilot. Um, practice a, it's not Buddhist. Buddhism doesn't own this. It's found in all major religions, and it's just a way of a human function. But it's found in Buddhism and Taoism, Christian centering prayer, Muslim prayers and meditations, especially Sufi. One of my favorite poets is Rumi, Jewish Shabbat, Greek and Roman Stoic philosophy, Henry David Thoreau's writings. So we can find this in all different cultures. It's not a religion or set of beliefs. It can just help you be the best blank you can be, right? Um, Last few minutes here, the myths of mindfulness. It's not about clearing your mind or zenning out, right? You have these, it's not hypnosis. It's not getting somewhere else or to, if I only can get to this stage or state, then I'll be mindful. Myth, only calm people can meditate. Um, False. I'm not sure who calm people are, but apparently folks believe that they exist. Um, I have to meditate for long periods of time to get any benefits. Not true. I mean, learning mindfulness is great to set aside formal practice. I'll talk about that in one of my last slides. But even small periods of time, even 30 seconds of mindful breathing can help cultivate awareness and acceptance. Someday I'll be able to meditate perfectly. It's like our achievement-based mindset that is drilled into us from a very young age. Someday. But today is the day. This is where life is happening, and this is where mindfulness provides its fruits for us, is today. Um, So feedback from some patients. One 79-year-old Japanese American caregiver participated in a 6-session mindfulness class. She said, I'd become aware of how my own stress came out towards my husband when he'd make a mess or lose things. I was much harsher on him than I should have been. I would feel guilty afterwards. Mindfulness helped me notice my emotions, not react out of anger as often. Before this, I wasn't really aware of my feelings and actions. 46-year-old Native Hawaiian woman caring for her mother with Parkinson's disease, dementia. Um, she had frequent intense blood pressure spikes, she called it, that were actually anxiety attacks, it turned out. Mindfulness helped her to kind of endure and eventually observe her scary internal feelings with less and less fear and avoidance. So mindful acceptance of the panic attacks actually led to their improvement and lessening, which greatly helped her in her caregiving role. So, like the farmer, she's not attacking the weeds directly. She's not saying, fix my panic attacks. She's cultivating the ground that the panic attacks were growing out of. And as a result, over time, actually had fewer and less intense panic attacks. 72-year-old Hawaiian Chinese man who felt frustrated with his wife as her cognition worsened. Mindfulness practice and acceptance practice helped him see that deep sadness and pain from seeing his wife's decline and from gradually losing his life partner was at the root of his anger. Allowing himself to feel his sadness more often and in times where he had space to do that helped significantly reduce the anger, resulted in his wife also feeling more calm, helped him appreciate special moments despite his wife's challenges, and could connect more instead of this anger or wanting her to be different getting in the way of them in the time that they had left. A very small, brief exercise you can do in any kind of moment. Stop stands for stop what you're doing. T, take a deep, mindful breath. O is observe and open to the moment. Anything in the moment without trying to fix it. Thoughts, emotions, body sensations, sounds. What is here right now? And then proceed with what you're doing with that little bit more of more degree of mindful awareness. So the goal is not to escape. I encourage folks to do formal practice in their life to learn mindfulness, which is setting aside, you know, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes to practice, say, mindful breathing, mindful walking, body scan exercises. You can use apps like Insight Timer. That's my favorite. It's free. The Calm app, Headspace. There's a lot these days. That's formal practice. That's like working out at the gym in service of informal practice, which is being healthier in your life. And informal practice is like washing the dishes mindfully as a mindfulness practice. Notice where your mind is and coming back to the feelings of the soap, the warm water, the dishes, the smells. That's bringing mindfulness into everyday life. Chores, commuting. Don't close your eyes while you're driving, though. If you're don't, to practice mindfulness, that is highly discouraged. Lastly, it's one tool in your self-care toolbox. I'm not saying this is all you need. You need exercise and nutrition, sleep, getting help, relaxation, social support, therapy if you need it, and a vacation. Well, that would be, a dream. So take home messages. We're all stressed. It affects all of us. Our thoughts and feelings are an important part of that. Change and acceptance are both helpful. Um, Changing our thinking about aging and caregiving can help how we live. And changing our reactions to unfixable problems can make them easier to bear. Hope you come away with something today, and there's some time for some questions.